All right. Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the podcast. It's going to be starring an old high school friend of mine named Kyle Brine. We would always say his full name, Kyle Brine. I don't know why. We even wondered why aloud, and there was no real reason. But his name is Kyle Brine, and he left Kent School, went to Brown University, and then became a super outdoorsman guy. And it was a really big, fun surprise. And he played the tuba at Kent, and that's what in our high school, and just a solid dude all around. So very excited to have him on. This is the first episode I'm doing with no notes, but he's got a packed punch of of fun. So I'm gonna bring him on. Hey,
Hey, Will.
hey, good to see you, man. This is
How's it
wild.
going? Yeah, good to see you.
Awesome. All right. All right. You can hear me okay? Everything like that?
I can, yeah. How about you? Is it good on your side?
It's good, yeah. All right. So I'm gonna get rolling right into it. This
What?
is my first interview with no notes I mentioned. So
Oh, all right.
but it's all good. Basically, what happened with you is, um, we met in high school and we had a bunch of cool friends there. Big backstory, and then after college, basically, I started seeing these photos of you with giant chainsaws and stuff like that. And those are pretty much the updates I've had since then. So,
Yeah, yeah,
how did
it's
you
accurate.
how did you get to that point?
Yeah, good question. After college, I was bouncing around trying to find some kind of work that I liked. I majored in philosophy, so that didn't really put me on a specific career path because I decided not to go into academia and I didn't want to be a lawyer.
Right.
So after a bit, I was working for a bit as a research assistant at a school of public health at Brown University, and at the time I was like, oh, this could like transition into like a different kind of like maybe like I was going to get like a PhD in like psychology or something. I was kind of thinking of at the time, like research psychology. But it turned out I hated the job. I was like, wow, this sucks. And like at the time, it was like the best paying job I'd had up to that point, and like the most like kind of prestigious kind of seeming thing. And so I
Right.
was like, wow, I really need to like go back to square one. So like I quit that job and I spent a few months just being like, all right, like I say, it was a well-paying job. So I kind of paused. I just kind of like let myself coast on that money for a bit.
Wow.
And until finally I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna move to Montana and like start doing conservation work. So I joined Montana Conservation Corps, which is like an AmeriCorps gig. So I was being paid like less than minimum wage,
Right.
living out in like the backcountry a lot of the time, doing trail work. Um, and some of it was chainsaw work. And I actually think those are probably the pictures you saw. I think those are
Yeah.
the so I did that for a year and I was like, you know what? I like this. So after that, since then, I've been doing that every like summer season or like late spring through early fall. I've been doing that kind of thing. I haven't done a whole lot of chainsaw work specifically.
Hmm.
Every once in a while, I will. And right now, what I'm like the past 2 summers, I've been working with this organization called Sierra Institute in Northern California. Um, and what I do, I'm on a crew that uses crosscut saws, which are those long, old-timey lumberjack
Yeah.
saws. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
That is the correct motion, sort of. Uh, and yeah, we're getting ready for prescribed burns in Lassen Volcanic National Park, um, in wilderness areas. So we're essentially dropping trees in the perimeter of the area that's going to be burned to give a
Wow.
place for the firefighters to stand when they light it on fire. And so if things kind of get out of hand, they have a space where they can defend it from. and not just be like, oh, well, I guess we're screwed now and we have to run. They just have a much better, they have
Right.
a way to control the burn a lot better this way. Um,
So
and
they
the
can Right. So they can sort of like gather these firefighters in this cleared out area and then go from there to make decisions basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Though the cleared out area is more like it's essentially like the width of a trail, and actually a lot of it is going to be a trail,
Right.
where we're just kind of clearing the canopy of trees that connect over that trail.
Right.
So it's not so much like a yeah, I don't know. There's different ways of kind of interpreting that, and I know most people aren't really familiar with this process or how this goes.
Mhm.
But essentially, yeah, there's like uh, what's effectively a trail around this area, and the area, I believe one of the areas we're doing is about 1,200 acres. That's off the top of my head. That might not be exactly right, but it's big.
Wow.
It's a lot of it's a lot of space. And Yeah, so we finished one what's called a unit uh back in 2019, and where
Mhm.
there are a couple of other units that we've done a lot of progress on this past summer, and this following summer the plan is to finish this all up. So we'll have the end result's going to be three separate units, each which with a trail, essentially a trail going around them that sets firefighters up to actually do the burning. And the reason why we're doing this with crosscut saws is in wilderness areas, designated wilderness areas, you're not allowed to use power tools like chainsaws. So usually what happens in wilderness areas is um, either people go in semi-legally with chainsaws to do the work, or more commonly the work just doesn't get done. Um, and they're just like, well, we can't do this here, so it just doesn't happen.
Wow.
Um, and to give a little context for like why, like what's even the point of this? Why are we just lighting things on fire in the woods? Like why? Um, Over here in a lot of America, including here in Northern California, before white people came over here and screwed everything up, the forests, it's just history. The forests were regularly lit on fire here, and that actually helped. That's just part of like the natural functioning of the ecosystems. Is like lightning hits, a lot of stuff burns, generally not such a big deal. But the policy for the past roughly a century, maybe a little less than a century, yeah, a bit less than a century, has been to put out every fire as soon as possible,
Right.
which kind of like makes intuitive sense. Like you're living in a town, there's like a fire nearby. You're like, hey, could y'all like make this not a thing? Could my house not light on fire, please?
Definitely the
Um,
problem-solving mind thinks should probably put
yeah,
that out. Yeah.
yeah, it's a great short-term solution. But what ends up happening is that since these fires can't burn as much, the fuels, meaning just like the down logs and branches and things, they just accumulate. They don't get burned, and there's just more and more of them. And then
Oh,
when a fire happens where they can't, where firefighters can't like just like take care of it really quickly, the fire is much more severe than it would have been otherwise, and spreads and potentially spreads a lot more.
wow.
So that's like really bad for the ecosystems, because it means that trees that otherwise would be fine with like these low severity or mid severity fires can do really poorly. The soil can get damaged, and basically the ecosystems get just like a lot more harmed than they would be by the low severity fires, which actually these ecosystems here actually evolved with these low severity fires. They actually need these to like for life to continue the way that it's used to continuing here. Um, and and so it messes up the ecosystems to have fewer fires, but then bigger fires when they happen. And also, of course, for humans, it also sucks because when these fires happen, they do things like destroy the town of Paradise, which made national news. Paradise is like maybe an hour, a couple hours away from where I live right now.
Hmm.
Um, and when you hear about these wildfires in California and in the West Coast generally, a lot of the problem is that we haven't been letting fires burn, so the fires happen really strongly at a massive scale. And this whole problem is made even worse by climate change, where now, because of the change in climate, things are drier for longer periods in the summer, which means, when a fire catches, it just has a lot more fuel that's ready to burn. Um, and so the idea of having a prescribed burn is what we're going to do is in a controlled way, um, get rid of these fuels essentially. So by burning it, there's going to be
Right.
a lot of this stuff on the ground is going to get consumed. So when a
Right.
fire comes through, it's going to be a low severity and
Right.
not
Yeah.
catastrophic.
So these firefighters are collecting dead fallen logs, bringing them into these units for burning, right?
Conveniently, the falling logs are already there. So since we're doing such a big area,
Hmm.
there's already been a huge amount of accumulation of fuels in that area. So we don't, the only fuel moving we need to do, and again, fuels is just like trees and
Debris
vegetation.
and stuff.
The
Yeah.
only move, exactly, yeah. So the only real moving we have to do is just right around that fire line, just around that trail, so that there's that buffer to keep the fire from getting out of this space we've created here. Um, and
Wow.
yeah, that's basically
That's
that's
fantastic,
the
man.
project.
So
It's
that
been
was a
cool to be involved in.
it is cool to be involved in. That was a great rundown of uh really what you do and the reasoning for it and everything. Yeah, nothing
Yeah.
but well outside my expertise, unfortunately, but that is so cool.
No,
Um
that's yeah.
and
It's cool to
so
talk about it to people who don't really know that much about it, because it's an important thing. And I certainly, before I moved out to like Montana, I had no idea this is a thing. So this
right.
is all relatively new to me too.
Yeah, like what we hear here is just that, I mean, we've heard that climate change is a factor and that,
Yeah,
that it's just really dry, and so that
yeah,
these fires can burn, but not that there's actually an accumulation of debris, not like because small fires haven't been allowed to happen, and that there
yeah.
is actually in some way some sort of solution that can be acted on.
Yes.
Never heard anything like that before. That's very, especially in terms of the California wildfires. It just seemed like a problem that wasn't going to be solved or couldn't be solved, and that's really interesting that you're part of this team that is doing something directly, like direct action towards that. That's very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I part of why I like it so much. I mean, it's also just a lot of fun, but it's great to be able to actually like directly address these problems. And yeah, I do think that there's an axe of mine to grind is just like that. In general, the media doesn't do a great job of really saying the big picture here. Climate change is obviously a huge problem. Anyone who denies that is totally wrong. And there are a lot of problems. There are a lot of problems with that are going along with climate change. Part of it is the wildfire, but it's not the big picture. It's not the only part of the big picture. And
Hmm.
the real and really the fundamental, like the initial problem, really, I would argue, and in general, fire scientists and people involved in this field would agree with me, that the fundamental problem really is the problem with fire management and how we've been keeping these fires so when they happen, they're worse. Um, and how to address it, it's I would say it's not so. Unfortunately, I wouldn't say that this is a way necessarily to solve the problem.
Right.
More so to try, yeah, more so to kind of mitigate. the problem and reduce it, because it's just there's a lot to deal with. There's human
Yeah.
habitation all throughout this area, so we can't just like the Native Americans did. We can't just let everything burn, or just like Native Americans, like apparently in this area, at least from some of what I've read, would
Hmm.
they wouldn't put out their campfires, and like they would literally just let things burn, and they also would intentionally burn things as well. This is a
Hmm.
very regular activity, and
Wow.
because of like the lower population density and differences in lifestyles, and like
Mm.
not having like cities that have like millions of people just like stuck in one area,
Yeah.
uh they were able to manage things in this way. We really can't do that,
Hmm.
but we can at least make things better, and or at least less bad, by doing these prescribed burns and doing them on a bigger scale than we've been doing them up to this point. And
Right.
there actually has been some like improvement here, like in the past few years, there has been more money put into this sort of catastrophic wildfire prevention. But I definitely think there needs to be more of that. And there needs to be a broader public understanding that this is actually a problem that you can address. It's
Right.
not just the thing of like trying
Right.
to like get internationally like to halt climate change or slow it down. That's totally like necessary,
Yeah.
but beyond that, we don't just have to be like, wow, this sucks. There's more we can do, and that we have to do at a more statewide or local scale, to make this aspect of the problem a lot less bad.
That was great, Kyle. So you're doing great work out there. So not to put you on the spot, I just am curious. If you don't know, you'd be just like me. But what what tribe was it in that area in Northern California?
It's a great
Um,
question. There were a lot of tribes in this general area and in California. Um, I've seen like maps of it at different points,
mhm.
and yeah, it's so many different peoples, so many different languages and ethnic groups, and just like yeah, really a scale that is honestly a little hard to imagine now, where you can just like where there's so much more homogeneity in terms of like different communities. I mean, there's a lot of diversity in America, and a lot of different, you know, uh, uh, you know, um,
Melting
not
pot,
everyone in
melting.
America is the same. Yeah,
Yeah.
but like in the end, like if you can speak English, you can speak Spanish, you can
Hmm.
talk to almost anyone in the United States,
Hmm.
and that just would not have been the case, even in California. So right specifically where I am right now in Lassen Volcanic National Park, and a little bit, I live a little bit to the west of Lassen Volcanic National Park, a little
Lassen.
bit. Yes, so it's
Okay.
not a super well-known park, but Lassen Volcanic, yeah.
Sounds
And
cool.
it is cool, yeah.
That wasn't sarcastic. It really
No,
does sound cool.
I know. I was laughing at myself for being like, yeah, it's cool. Um, so um, I yeah, so the indigenous people right around here were the Yana, and this is a group of people that were murdered by the white people in the area completely.
Wow.
The last member of this group was alive in the early 1900s. His name was Ishi. Um, there's a whole story about Ishi, and actually his name wasn't even Ishi, but which is, I know, a very confusing thing to say right there. I'm there's a lot to say
Oh,
here. I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but
you're doing
yeah,
great.
the people here were the Yana. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
The people here were the Yana, and there were several Yana tribes that, as far as we know, and we don't really know a whole lot, um, they would stay roughly to a relatively like. I'm going to pause here because in what I was saying, and I'm going to step back a little bit because I read a book about Ishi and the Yana last year, that was written in like the first half of the 20th century, or I think it was around 1950 or something like that.
Okay.
And I'm friends with a couple archaeologists here, and talking to them, I've got actually a different picture of what actually the Yana would have been doing in this area. So the anthropologists who are studying the Yana around the in the early 1900s, when there still was one person left alive from the tribe, um, were pretty racist and making a lot of assumptions about things. And so a lot of stuff that was
Right.
written at the time, um, when archaeologists have gone through more recently and actually looked at like evidence of what's here, where arrowheads are, and seeing what the, you know, how people would have had to live here, considering what the ecosystems are like, it seems like a lot of what's written about the Yana and that I read about the Yana is probably wrong. Um, so so to so to kind of give a picture of the best picture I've been able to get about the Yana from the archaeologists here is, it seems like they're a group of people that in the summer months would live up in Lassen Volcanic National Park, or that general area, what's now called that. Um, and uh, and uh, and have a hunter-gatherer lifestyle with the plants and the animals that you can live off up in this park.
Right.
It happens to be the case, though, is that this park is this area is covered by like an enormous amount of snow in the winter,
Mm-hmm.
and prey animals like deer and so on tend to not hang out there in
Yeah.
the winter,
Right.
and any plants you might use don't really have vegetative parts above the ground, and are
Mm-hmm.
covered with maybe about 20 feet of snow. So it seems like what the Yana would do in the winter is go downhill a bit, a little west of the park, maybe other areas also, but I know west of the park, and where there are essentially these oak savannas where you have all this grassland with oaks scattered through. And it seems like they probably would have conducted prescribed burns in this area to manage this oak woodland to eat the acorns. Because
Mm-hmm.
acorns in this area, a lot of different tribes would
Wow.
like grind down acorns and use that for like essentially for something sort of like bread. I mean, I'm probably messing it up, but essentially it'd be like
Yeah.
a core meal in that way. And
Yeah.
so that seems to be, they seem to have kind of wandered up and down the mountains and the hills here to kind of subsist in different ways.
Very
Um,
cool. Was there any,
yeah,
did
so
you,
super interesting group.
yeah. Did you find any
Yeah,
evidence of sort of like um cured meats or anything like that for the winter? I mean, was it
that's a great
just,
question.
yeah.
I do not know the answer to that.
That's
I don't know
okay.
the answer.
That's okay.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering if it was really just acorns for the winter. It was like
yeah.
you guys must have
I'm
had
I'm
some
guess
snacks.
yeah. I'm guessing not just acorns. I assume they were hunting also, and they had other plants to use.
Mm,
But my impression is that um, there, from what I've heard, it seems like there's evidence of prescribed burns in that area, and there are just a lot of oak trees,
right,
um, and that's just a great source of of food.
right,
Um, so my impression is that that was at least a staple. That was like an important part of their diet. I know
right.
personally, if I were in their shoes, I feel like curing meat seems like a great way to do things if you have enough meat to cure, but I have no idea what they actually, I don't know much beyond that of how they actually made a living on the land.
That's okay.
Uh,
That was plenty, man. And then so you talk about like sort of protecting the ecosystem in that area. What is the ecosystem to your knowledge? Um, like what's the I don't know much about ecosystems. Like
all
how
good.
how do they what is the ecosystem in Lassen Volcanic National Park?
Yeah, so up in the park, you have a lot of forests that are generally often dominated by red firs. At higher elevations, you have more different species of firs, different species of trees, a lot of hemlocks, for instance. And there are also areas that are more kind of open and less forested.
Hmm.
Um, uh, my impression is that a plant that was really important for a lot of people's around here for eating was it's called mule's ear. Wyathia mollis is the scientific name for it, and it's essentially it's a plant in the sunflower family. So it has one of those it has one of those flowers that like with the yellow rays coming out and really pretty.
Right.
And the the uh, the leaf is kind of looks like a mule's ear. It's this kind of like elliptical thing that's kind of fuzzy and people would eat the root of it. Apparently, the root was a really good food source, and there still
Oh,
are a lot of this plant growing in this area. So I know that's one of the things people would eat. And they're also like manzanita, a lot of manzanita out there, something we don't have in the Northeast. But it's this beautiful shrubby thing with often with this cool like red peeling bark, and has these berries, which I know bears like to eat them. I've seen bears eat them.
that's cool.
And
You've
yeah,
seen a
I've
grizzly
seen
bear up close.
not grizzly bears,
Okay.
brown
That's-
bears.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I have occasionally seen brown bears pretty up close. Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, it's pretty they're very cool. Yeah. Um
What?
the scientific name of manzanita, by the way, is Arctostaphylos, which literally means bear berries in
Wow.
in Greek. So that's referring to the fact that bears will go around and eat these berries. And I don't
Right.
really know if humans in the area would eat these berries too, but you can eat them, and there are lots of them. So I don't know.
Right.
I kind of feel like probably just my guess would be that people would eat them because they're there and they're food, you know.
Totally. What's some other classic sort of nature things you've seen in California, like salmon swimming upstream, stuff like that?
I would love to see that. I have not seen that.
That's yeah.
Um, yeah.
I guess it's
Um,
more of a rare sight. Let me just double back
Unfortunately,
into. Oh,
yeah,
sorry. Go on.
yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, what?
Um, um, yeah. I mean, seeing huge salmon spawns back before white people came through and messed things up.
It's less
That would have
common.
been a
Yeah.
very common sight. I don't know here specifically.
Yeah.
I don't. We're pretty high up. I don't know if salmon would have come all the way out here, but
Yeah.
yeah, that would have at one point been if you were there at the right time, that would have been
Yeah.
like an incredible and very common sight to see. Yeah,
Apparently, a couple years ago, we had like a salmon spawn revival in the Connecticut River,
really.
and you
Wow.
really. So I don't know where it's at
Wow.
now, but it like scientists were literally calling it a miracle. They were just like, we can't this.
Yeah.
I can't believe this even happened. We need to make sure this
Yeah.
keeps happening. But basically,
Yeah. Yeah.
there was like a genuine respawn from like no salmon at all. I don't really know how it happened, but so there was hope in like 2018. I'll have to look it up. Maybe we'll do like an addendum video or something at some point. I just want to double back quick into your history because
Sure.
this is a cool piece of trivia about you. You tapped maple syrup for a summer, and
That's true.
those are long hours apparently. They're like 16-hour days. Can you sort of describe that process at all?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, a few winters ago. It's more of a winter activity.
Right, my bad.
And this is actually I think this is the that's all good. I think this would
I
have been
actually I've worked on farms for a good few years, so like I sometimes I really wish I knew or remembered more than I have. But yeah, go on. Yeah, okay. So
there-
I messed up
there's
the
a
actual season of maple syrup.
there's a lot to know. There's a lot to know
Yeah.
in this world. So yeah, the maple trees yeah, I was working at a kind of a plantation of of maple trees, started by this rich dude
In New
in
York State.
downstate New York. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, around where I grew up.
Uh-huh.
Um, and he this guy, I believe his main house is in New York City, and we bought a house with a property up near where I grew up,
Yeah.
with a bunch of maple trees, and he was like, "Oh, I feel like we can monetize this," basically. So he kind of so he started this big operation, which at the time I was working there, I think 3 winters ago, was,
Mm-hmm.
I believe, the third biggest producer of maple syrup in the world.
Right.
And the world, for maple syrup is just like the northeast of America and that area of Canada, more or less. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so the process for that, they had this very cool setup where since they had so many trees they were doing this with, they would
Mm-hmm.
have these centralized collection houses
Mm-hmm.
with tanks for the sap and vacuums, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, literal vacuums, like not like you're cleaning your house with, but a pump with these big pipes coming out of this central collection house uphill, and the pipes would have smaller pipes off of those pipes, and the
Right.
smaller pipes would have more smaller pipes off of those, and those would connect to the maple trees. And so what we would do is, for one thing, we would fix the pipe system because
Yeah.
squirrels like to chew on it because of the sugar residue, or
Yeah.
maybe because they just like chewing on the, not really clear on exactly what's going on there. Uh, but because it's like this nice, like, kind of rubbery, like, plastic material. I feel like it's probably kind of enjoyable, like good, like teething. Um, but like you stole your dog like a chew toy, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Who knows what motivates the squirrel?
yeah, not sure about the answer to that one. But yeah, so you take these these tubes at the end, which have some vacuum, a little bit of suction with them.
Yeah.
You drill a little bit of hole into the maple tree, just going in, just a little bit, just down to the phloem, which is the layer of the tree that has the sap coming through it. And
Right.
you hammer that in. And if you do this at the right time of year, which is like late winter, there's a lot of sap coming through maple trees, a lot of sugary sap, and then that gets pulled through down to the collection facilities where they have these machines there, reverse osmosis machines,
Uh-huh.
which essentially pulls out a lot of the water from the sap so that they
Right.
can then put the sap in these big trucks um, and drive them to a central location where they actually boil it,
Yeah.
and then from that you get the actual maple syrup. So it's
That's cool.
yeah,
Yeah, I keep forgetting that there's actual water, from this tapping process that has to be filtered out from these trees.
yeah, there's so
And
much.
and then
Yeah,
it's really a lot. And then
yeah,
and then also I noticed, like, for the hammering, it's a light hammering. Can you go too far and just be
yeah,
like, this tree is ruined, or what's that like? Do you just like
yeah.
do you,
They've set up the drills so that you just drill in the right amount.
oh, okay.
So when you hammer it in, the little plastic tap thing just hits the end of the wood, and that's the drill is designed so that is the right place to hammer it in. Um,
Cool.
and yeah, so it is
It,
it is a cool thing. And traditionally, the whole thing of like reverse osmosis, traditionally you would just boil the sap, but if
right.
you got fancy technology and you're trying to move vast quantities of it, it makes sense to get out of the water, a lot of the water, beforehand, so you don't have to send out as many trucks to move the material. That's the idea of having that initial um, pulling out of water before actually um, getting it to the boiling process.
Wow,
Um,
very cool. So did you get free maple syrup? Do you hate maple syrup now? Where are you at with
no,
that?
I love
Yeah.
maple syrup.
Yeah.
I don't, it's expensive. I don't really buy it, but yeah, for Christmas they gave us like a good sized jug of maple syrup, um, and yeah, it was really good. It was like bourbon maple syrup, like actual bourbon mixed in with the maple syrup. And since I'm
Wow.
just sort of like a madman, I would I would take it out of the fridge and literally just like have like a shot of it directly out of it. And yeah, it was good times, good times.
That's a
Um,
great that's a great snack, man.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, Litchfield Distillery around here, they wound up having it's a whiskey distillery around here.
Uh,
They started doing a maple, like a sort of a maple flavored bourbon, and then
yeah, yeah,
so they started developing their own maple syrup. And the thing is, like, their maple syrup is like fantastic.
yeah,
So it was like kind of a weird byproduct of starting a whiskey company.
yeah.
But
That's awesome.
yeah, so that's really cool, man. So you've run out of that by now, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
The job itself was I didn't really enjoy, there were parts of it that were really cool, but the
Right.
company I'm not actually that crazy about, which is why I have not said their name conspicuously.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad because I still want to try that out. That's one of my job bucket lists. So I might try it out for a
hey,
winter or something like that.
hey, you might like it, you know. I just happen not to be crazy about this particular situation I was in, but
Yeah.
it's a very cool process. And as long as you're down for like during the peak season to be working you know, very long hours. There were, I personally usually during that season was working maybe about 12 or 13 hours. There were some people who would stay for even longer, like 16, like you're saying, or even just
Yeah.
not sleeping during certain parts of it. So yeah,
Right.
but it's a cool process. I would just say if you do find this opportunity and you have the chance to, it's I would have preferred to work for like one of these smaller companies that are more, you know,
Yeah.
um, that aren't necessarily aren't doing as much of
Mass.
funneling money
Yeah.
to the, you know, to people who are already rich, because that's effectively what's going on with this company. Uh, so just like any big company.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying stuff like that. I think it's a tough thing. Like anybody would want to work for a nice big company and get the paycheck, but you know, it can't. You know, you want you know, you want a restaurant, you want a mom and pop restaurant, you want, you know, an independent film, you know, you want a
Yeah,
national park,
yeah.
all that stuff. You want public services and utilities, you know. Um, you shouldn't have to pick between one or the other, whatever. Um,
For sure.
so with the kind of work you do, how often does a guy like you get to eat pancakes, or like what's your diet like? You know what I mean? Do you still
Oh
get to
yeah.
enjoy maple syrup and stuff like that?
Yeah, no, I haven't really had much maple syrup in the past since working there basically.
Right.
Um because really just because it's expensive.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't I'm very much utilitarian when it comes to food. I just kind of like I love good food, but I don't really I'm not like interested enough in the cooking process to really make like fancy food for myself. I just try to have it be healthy ish
Yeah.
and fill me up, and then just get it out of the way, scarf it down, and then move on to the next thing. But
Right.
but yeah, so I haven't had, but yeah, a good, you know, I've driven across the country a few times, and one of
Yeah.
my favorite things to do is to find like a really good like diner, just like mom and pop place, and get
Right.
like a nice, huge like breakfast there. There are
Awesome.
just some just fantastic places you can just find just randomly. I went to a great place in like Indiana. Uh, that was one of my favorite places I've found. This is a great place. This wasn't from driving cross country, but I worked in the Adirondacks for a while. And
Wow.
there's this place up in Saranac Lake, this tiny city. It's like a large town for the area. Um, that DJ's Rustic Restaurant. I will say them by name because they're so good. Amazing spot.
You heard it
Um,
here first.
highly
DJ's
recommend DJ's Rustic Restaurant.
DJ's Rustic
Yeah, Saranac
Restaurant in
Lake.
Indiana. I'm gonna have to talk to them now somehow.
Oh, no, this is in the Adirondacks. This is
Oh,
Adirondacks, upstate New York. Yeah, there's I don't remember the name of the place in Indiana,
right.
uh, but yeah.
Well, we'll have to cover the Adirondacks another time because that's super interesting too, man. Wow. you're gonna have a two-parter for sure.
It's a good time too.
Yeah. So
Let's do it.
you
Let's do it.
you so I was gonna try and have this be a time capsule episode, which means I don't know exactly when it's coming out. And when we were in high school, we imagined this world with a weird system of time where it was we would try to make up random times that didn't exist, like
Oh
with animal
yeah.
names, like half past the badger and
I had I had totally forgotten about that. Yeah.
yeah, half past the badger and just before the mongoose or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
remember all of them, but
No, neither do I. Do you remember when half past the badger was supposed to be?
it was pretty much like we were basically saying "see you later."
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
See, half past
uh,
the badger. Yeah,
right. So
that's great. Yeah, we
you,
need more of that.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Our,
Yeah,
our time telling, it's gotten so boring. We're just this, always the same 7 days, same 12 months,
yeah.
same 24 hours. Let's mix things up a bit.
What's that
Half
about?
past
I
the badger.
agree.
Yeah,
Yeah, half past the badger, and then
yeah.
it's a great way to say you don't know what time this is gonna be. It's gonna be half past the badger,
Give me half
okay?
past the badger. That's what's gonna. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Oh man. So you're actually living in the park.
I am living
Last.
in the park headquarters, where
Wow.
a lot of staff for the park work. Um,
Mhm.
it's a little bit down mountain from the park, around the snow line, which makes the snow a bit more manageable. In years when there is a lot of snow. So far, this is not one of those years, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so I right now, this is outside of my work season. I'm volunteering for the
Oh,
park, mainly doing botany work. I'm trying to learn more about botany and have that be something I
totally.
can do professionally, as well as the crosscut stuff. Or I'm just trying to have a more broad range of things I can do. So if I come
Yeah.
to a point where I'm like, my God, this like hard physical labor stuff, I am too old for this. I need to stop. I'll not
I
be like
know. I know.
just suddenly have nothing I can do.
Yeah. So
So
botany
and I
is
love plants.
flower.
It's so interesting.
Botany is flower
Yeah,
science.
any sort of plants would fit under that.
Mm,
Mushrooms also traditionally included in that, but I've been
cool.
focusing on the side of things. So the part I'm interested in is doing field surveys, especially like for rare plants and just in
Uh,
general to go out and figure out, hey, this is what's here and this is where, and now we have this information that makes it easier for us to manage it. If you're trying to manage an ecosystem, you don't know what's there. That's not ideal to say the least.
right.
And also, as climate change is happening, it's important for us to know where things are now, so that later we can say, okay, this is how things have changed, and maybe we can understand this better. So going forward, we can um, we can mitigate these effects better. Because unfortunately, climate change is for sure here to stay. There is more that we can do and need to do
Mhm.
national level to kind of slow down climate change and to mitigate its effects. But the climate, it's things are getting warmer. They're more erratic weather behavior, and it's going to keep on. We've already gone past the point of no return to a certain degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
So part of the rationale for doing these field surveys is to figure out, to have like a baseline understanding what's here, so that when things change, we can see how they changed. Um, yeah.
Good for you, man. You'll definitely have to come back on again. And so, on top of all this, this is your normal routine. You want to do some more activism on the side. So, you
Yeah,
were telling
yeah,
me,
that's
what do
what I'm
you?
trying to get involved in there, and I'm still trying to figure out what specifically to do there. I've just realized I've been right out of college. So I graduated college 2013.
Mm,
Right out of that, I started doing door-to-door canvassing for an environmental nonprofit. Um, Trying to do environmental advocacy, and it was like a fun summer. But in general, I found the process, and I still do find the process of like political activism like immensely frustrating. Um,
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
so at a certain point I was like, no, screw this. I'm just gonna, like, you used the word earlier, direct action for what I do, and that's exactly how I see it too. It's literally just being like, you know what, like the decision makers are like, most of them are making the wrong decisions, so screw it. I'm just gonna do what has to be done. And I want to continue doing that, but I've just become increasingly aware that what happens politically, I don't want to just ignore it and just hope people are going to do the right thing. So I'm trying
Yeah.
to get involved with efforts to essentially um, push political parties to actually act more
Yeah.
on environmental justice and human rights, and just these general ways that we can make the world better, and that can be done, but we just have in power on both political parties, essentially run by the people with money. And the Democrats are for sure better. I'm so happy that we have I so much prefer Biden to Trump. I so much prefer the current composition of our legislative bodies at a federal level to what they were. But they they really need to actually act strongly. And I think that activists have played an important role, an essential role, and are
Yeah.
going to continue to play an essential role to actually push politicians to actually do what they say they're going to do, and to also you know push them farther to do things maybe they haven't even said they're going to do, but later hopefully will have to do to remain in power. That's my hope, and what I really want to see happen is more and more of these mass movements uh, being like, look, if you don't do things this way, like, you're gone. Like I know you don't care about us, but you need to. But like you're gonna lose. But you're gonna lose power if you don't do X, Y, and Z. So you better do it.
Right.
And I think we've already seen a little bit of that happening very early on in this Biden's administration.
Mm.
But we need to see a lot more of that happening, and I wanna
Yeah.
kind of some way help out with that.
I
But
mean,
I'm very early in figuring specifically how to get involved, so I'm gonna for now kind of pass on saying any particulars there, because I'm still trying to get my feet together, and I don't want necessarily to like promote any particular organization when, like, the ones I'm currently working with, when I don't really know yet how
yeah,
that's going. Yeah.
good call. I do kind of want to sort of linger on this topic for a minute, not necessarily in the presidency realm, because that's a pretty
Sure.
loaded bullet. But
Sure.
one thing I kind of got the inside scoop on is, or at least from my perspective and what I've heard in hearsay is, you know, it is hard to win an election, even at the lowest rung. If you're, trying to run for the zoning board or something in
Yeah.
a certain space, like it's
Yeah.
hard and you have a lot of people to please. And then when you get the job, you have a lot of people to please, and you have
Yeah.
to sort of accept that certain things are the way they are and you don't have that many choices anyway. So,
Yeah.
like,
For sure.
if you're in such an immediate space where, what are some things that you think relatively are changes that really could happen kind of more quickly than is said by, say, like a town government or something like that? Like,
Right. Like, essentially what can be done by governments at a local level? Is that your
yeah,
question?
by governments at a local level that might actually, like the three easiest things to address climate change. Not that any of them are easy necessarily, but
Yeah.
if you were a town government and it's like, no, really, like, we're gonna we're gonna do it. We'll start with the three easiest things. What do you think they
Yeah.
would be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't really have a complete answer for that necessarily. It's still something I'm trying to figure out. And I know that that's going to vary, of course, depending on, what local government we're talking about. Um,
Yeah.
I one big thing is to protect whatever natural areas that are right there in that vicinity, because generally a town is going to have at least some influence with zoning or other policies about how we're going to treat the land we have there. So that's huge, is to be good stewards of whatever land we
Is
have influence over
yeah,
at a local level. Um, and yeah, and I think really, like, I don't know as much as I would like to know about how much sway particular local governments are going to have in different areas. I'm current the nearest city to me, small city to me, uh, that well, the nearest one that I like, I feel a certain kind of kinship to, that I kind of like,
yeah,
is Chico, and they and I'm currently in the process of learning, of starting to kind of get involved a little more with their politics and seeing how things are happening there. So hopefully in a few months I'll have or maybe even a few weeks, I'll have a much better sense of, say, in Chico, what can be done there.
right,
The example of land management and stewardship I mentioned comes from when I'm confident that applies to a lot of different local governments.
oh yeah,
I mentioned it in particular because it was back in Pauling, the town I grew up in on the border of Connecticut and New York. Um, uh, Last time I was living there a couple years ago, I was involved in efforts there to pressure the local government to protect certain natural areas there. Um, these are areas on the Appalachian Trail that were already under protection, but there are certain forces within the local government that were working to essentially remove that protection from areas right around it, and develop right on the edges of these important wetlands, and that would have almost certainly had a detrimental effect on these important ecosystems a short walk away from where I grew up. Um, and the I was working with this group called the Protect Pollen Coalition,
oh
and
wow,
so together we were able to get a spread awareness of this a lot, and get a lot of locals involved, to the point where the town hall, the people, the politicians, who were trying to make money off of this area, and in the process
yeah,
damage the ecosystems and damage this recreational area a lot of people use. Basically got them to back down on that. I think that's going to be a continuing struggle, but that was definitely a win, because if it weren't for the various local people trying to get this not to happen, that would have already happened. Um, and uh,
right,
I
very
think
good
that's
point.
it's an important thing to know, and it's an important reason for anyone who's like involved, who's like interested in like the natural areas right around where they live. It's a good reason
Yes,
to be aware of what your local government is doing,
what they're
because they
saying
would
about those
be,
parks, definitely.
and, and what they may be doing, but not advertising, because a big part of this, of getting this construction project to not go forward, was just to let people know, hey, these people are trying to do this, and
Yeah,
everyone's like, wait, what? We
right,
don't want that.
right,
And then they're like, oh God, oh shucks, they found us out, and so they had to stop. Essentially, is what happened. So
yeah,
in general, at local politics, there aren't that many people involved,
right,
and so that gives anyone involved more sway,
yep,
which also means that someone who's interested um, in exploiting local governments for their own personal gain, if people
yeah,
aren't paying attention, it's relatively easy to do. Um,
yeah.
so it's a reason to pay attention.
Nearby my hometown, we lost a forest to basically become a not a forest necessarily, but a large stretch of woodland, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
like an amount
yeah,
of trees that like literally when I pass by it on a school bus, it would relax my mind,
Yeah,
just seeing tree
yeah,
after tree. And
yeah, yeah.
all of those were felled to put in a shopping plaza that is filled
Right,
with stores that are or were 10 miles down the road. Yeah,
right,
right.
right.
And so
Exactly. Yeah,
I think if people had known about that beforehand, I don't think that would necessarily be the case, except
yeah.
for there's one clothing store that's there that I'm sure people would have been like, well, that clothing store is okay. But
Yeah.
that's really cool stuff you're up to. There's some pretty hard boiled information, man. That's really cool.
Cool.
Um, yeah. So I just want to double back real quick, like really you must have to manage your diet a little bit. I mean, you must have to be like, all right, if I don't have this for breakfast, I'm not going to get through the morning. If I don't have this for lunch, I'm not going to get through the afternoon. So like what's like a
I I I do actually. And it's just my eating habits are a little absurd. So I kind of but let's get into it.
no,
So
if you can be like, I don't want to talk.
no. It's all good. It's honestly funny. It's something. It's like a almost a running joke with some of my friends, just how ridiculous my eating habits are. So, but so how I eat it depends on what I'm doing. Like right now, I'm not super active. I'm sitting inside or I'm outside looking at plants and not like running around chopping down trees.
Right.
But if we're talking about like during the work season, like this past work season, we were stationed out of a um, a ranger station where we had access to a kitchen,
Mm,
which is not always the case for this kind of work, but
right.
it was in that case. So every morning I would drink a cup of coffee. I would have yogurt, which I would mix in with granola. And then
Nice.
I would have at 10 o'clock, I would have an energy bar. I found there's these like, uh, sometimes you can find some relatively good protein bars that have actual natural ingredients. And I like that stuff.
Mm,
Sometimes you can just find that nasty stuff that's just like sugar and protein. But honestly, if I'm
yep.
just like hiking around with all this equipment and swinging axes and stuff, I really like to have something that's just going to kind of energize me, fill me up quickly, and just give me that protein I need. So even though those things are not always that good for you, I'll still like going for it.
Yeah.
Um,
So 10
lunch,
a.m. you're out there by then, right? So
yeah. So
the
we'll
day
start work at
starts at
7.
7.
Day's gonna work at 7. We'll hike out with our equipment to wherever we're gonna work.
Mhm.
Um, Tend to take a break at 10 to eat a snack and just rest for a bit.
Yeah.
Lunchtime every day for lunch for years. I have had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, uh, all natural peanut butter because I hate that fucking high fructose corn syrup crap. I can't stand it. So
Yeah.
I'll have crunchy all natural peanut butter.
Cool.
And then 2:30 we'll have another little break and I'll eat
Well,
another
what about the
protein bar.
jelly though? I mean,
Oh yeah, jelly.
is there
So I
high
like
fructose in your jelly or what?
no, I hate that shit. I can't stand that. No, I'll have I have some sort of like preserved spread.
Cool.
That's fruit and sugar and no high fructose corn syrup or any sort of corn syrup.
Nice.
I very much hate that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and then for dinner I have I'll usually rotate about 3 meals that I will have.
Mhm.
And this past
And so
summer I
you
would have
finish work
whole
at
wheat.
what, 5, 6?
Yeah, it's generally 10-hour work days, so it'll be
Okay.
7 to 5:30.
All right.
Um, and yeah, so then I'll have either whole wheat pasta with olive oil and Parmesan cheese, or I will have a quesadilla with refried beans and sriracha, or
Cool.
I will have field roast sausage, which is a kind of like veggie sausage, like wheat gluten based sausage, stir
Oh wow.
fried with onions and mushrooms and sriracha, and those are the three. That is the total of all the food that I eat other than beer. So
Are you a
yeah.
vegetarian?
When I go grocery shopping, I try to stay vegetarian, but I let myself eat meat if it's like at a restaurant or someone offers me some because I just like it. I just like it so
Yeah.
much. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I
better
was
for
just
the
curious.
environment to have less of it. So I when I go
Oh wow.
grocery shopping, I try not to. to eat is to eat.
What about coffee? Are you like an enthusiast or at all? Or?
I drink medium bad coffee, just enough so I can not be having a bad time. Oh yeah, and I chew gum after every meal also, and every snack. so
Oh, I love that, man. That's so
so yeah,
cool.
I'm
So
very yeah
you're a woodsman. You drink bad coffee
yes
in the morning
yes
with yogurt, and then
that's correct.
you have a protein bar when you're
Yes
carrying your axes around. You have a
yes
PB&J for lunch
yes, and tea. I have tea for lunch too. I bring out
in a thermos,
Earl
right?
Grey tea in a thermos. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So
I mean, are you one of those like it steeps forever guys? Like the tea is steeping all day long?
I used to do that, but then
You're
I
weird.
realized you weren't really getting more caffeine out of it, and it tasted
It's
nasty.
gross. Yeah,
It's
it
gross. It's
is.
disgusting. So
Yeah.
I did that for a while, and then I
I'm
stopped.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you learned your lesson.
I learned my lesson.
And you came to your senses. That's really important.
Came to my
Es-
senses.
Especially
Yes.
if you're in activism, you know, you need people to take you seriously. And if you're brewing your tea all morning long, that's just not. I wouldn't
That's
trust you if you were one of those guys.
that's the thing. That's the thing that'll do it. And be like, wow, this person, he seems like he has something to say. He's kind of weird. Oh, but the tea thing, yeah, that's it. I can't
It's a,
handle that. We have to get
it
rid of
is.
this
It's
guy.
a deal breaker. That's
Yeah,
just how I
gotcha.
feel.
That's hilarious.
That's
That's
how I make
hilarious.
my. That's how I do my voting and everything like that. All right,
Just find
cool.
out like the tea habits of the various politicians. Go from there.
That would be great, actually. I think it would be
I
better.
I'd be into
Well,
that.
you know, one thing I will say about the whole president thing is there's really not a lot of tests. You know, there's like no, there's no, you know, you'd think you'd at least have to write a 5 paragraph essay to become the president. You know, like
Yeah, that's funny. That's a good point. Yeah,
really.
it's like yeah. Yeah, I don't
So
know what test to have necessarily, but it's true. It doesn't seem like you need a whole lot of qualifications.
yeah.
Kind of seems pretty clear.
Right. So, all right. So, you have this time. You've given us such great information. Is there any stone we haven't turned over? Anything else you'd want to leave us with that we might not know?
I kind of want to go back to something I said earlier because I said something kind of cryptic and then change the topic.
Mm,
I was talking about the Yana, the indigenous people in this area. The
mm,
last the last member of that people was I said is named Ishi, but Ishi wasn't his name. And then I just stopped talking about that. So this guy who we call Ishi, he and his after his people were intentionally murdered and wiped out by the white people who came to the area. He and his like family group of like 5 of them um, uh, survived in secret, living off the land for something like 5 years, like
wow.
in an area where like people were living and like farming, like not too
Wow.
far away. And they just
Hmm.
in secret, people were traveling through and hunting, and they just
Wow.
were, better at living off the land and knew the land better than the the newcomers. So they were able
Mm,
to pull that off for a while. But
wow.
finally, his family members, other than him, ended up passing away. I don't really know the details of why, if they got sick or just grew old or what it was. And finally,
Right.
the only one left was this one guy. So he was like, you know what? I guess this is it. And he just wandered into some white person's farm, not speaking any white person's language, and just being like, just like, here I am. Like he was like on the brink of starvation. He's like, just
Wow.
take me. And it's important to like realize too that like for him, like white people were just the murderers. They're just the people who every time they would, they were the people who
Yeah.
intentionally exterminated his people. So it was like very much an act of desperation to be like,
Wow.
I
You
just don't
caught
know what to do
me,
at this
please.
point.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I believe he was maybe about in his 50s at the time, something like that. And we'd already made that switch in that area from seeing like as uh, Native Americans as people to murder, to Native Americans as these romanticized like people who we want to like, you know,
Right.
celebrate, but in a way of like not give any power, not actually really like
Help.
help
Help.
help
Yeah.
them, but just be like, oh, they're this past tense, you know.
Hmm.
So he so because of that shift in attitude, there wasn't really any desire to kill him, and instead he got connected to these anthropologists who worked down at UC Berkeley,
Right.
and he got moved down to UC Berkeley and lived at the museum there for
Right.
the rest of his for like I think a few years before he died of a white people disease, and so he learned English in the process, and
Wow.
the anthropologists were able to learn a lot about the Yana language, which is super interesting. I won't get into it right now, and also I don't know how much to trust those sources now. That I've learned that a
Yeah.
lot of what I
Right.
learned reading their writings was inaccurate.
So sorry,
But
this was in the 1850s or
this is in the early 1900s was when Ishii was found, or not found. He gave himself up essentially. It's like a
wow.
yeah. And when he was brought down to UC Berkeley, and he Ishii actually just means man in the Yana language. In their culture, you wouldn't tell strangers your name
Wow.
because that would give them power over you.
Wow.
So he never, so in all the years when, he was living around these white people and they were learning from him and he was, learning stuff from them also, though obviously it was a very one-sided interaction. He never told anyone his name. Um,
Wow.
and
Wow.
I just think that's so hardcore.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, I think whenever you encounter a story that hardcore, it really changes you. It makes you want to be more hardcore, and then you're immediately sort of at odds with anyone who hasn't heard the story,
Are
right?
you gonna stop? Are you gonna stop telling people your name now?
That would be so cool. I would. That would be. I mean, I don't think I could possibly live up to that. Yeah, that was. Well, no one knew my name in Kent school. It was always Guillermo. My,
That's true,
my name in
Guillermo.
Spanish.
Guillermo, yeah. I had to stop myself from being like at the beginning of this, being like, "Hey, Guillermo, how you doing?" Because I know you usually go by Will now, but yeah, you'll always be Guillermo to me,
I actually
Will.
never really went by Guillermo at
Oh, but
first.
everyone told you that anyway. No
They
one
were like,
cared. No,
"No,
he's
your
Guillermo.
name is Guillermo."
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, well, yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, all right. That was a great story, man. Thanks for telling that. Cool. All right, we'll leave it there for now. You'll definitely have to do another one of these, man. Thanks so much.
Fun. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Cool to talk about this stuff.
Definitely, big time. It was cool to hear about it. All right, man. Keep doing your thing. It's good to know that someone's doing something for sure. And so do you think if you'd known there was such a thing as a fire scientist, you still would have gone to school for philosophy?
Yeah, I for
Right?
sure wish that I had. This is a whole another topic, but I for sure wish I had known what I wanted to do with my life before I went to college. I think the
Yeah.
idea of
Yeah.
figuring yourself out in college is mostly BS. I think most people
Yeah.
don't do that. I for sure wish I would. I don't regret studying philosophy, but I for sure would
Right.
have, in addition, studied environmental science or botany or something
Yeah.
related to the outdoors.
But you
Absolutely.
definitely don't hear about these cool jobs growing up. Like I can tell you
I
for sure,
did not. Yeah.
if someone had leaned into a classroom and gone, it's totally plausible you could be a fire scientist, I
Yeah,
think things would be very different. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
I had no idea there's all this cool shit you can do. Yeah, I had no idea.
Right.
But at
Exactly.
least I found it. That's the main thing. So
Big time, man. All
yeah,
right. Thanks for coming on. We'll be in touch soon in general and for this stuff. Yeah, it's great to see you again, man.
same. Yeah. All right. Take care.
You too, man. Peace out.